The officer didn't even look at her face before he decided what she was. That was the part that stayed with everyone who witnessed it. Not the handcuffs, not the shouting, not the way the fluorescent lights of the Rideau Center food court caught the whole scene in that cold, flat light that makes everything look worse than it already is. It was that first glance, the one that lasted maybe half a second, and the decision that came with it. Major Celestina Barra-Ossi had just finished. Court. Celestina Barra-Ossi is in the used names file. She was there with her daughter. That much was certain. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November, the kind of day Ottawa saves for people who forgot to appreciate autumn. Grey sky pressing down, wind coming off the Rideau River with real intent. She'd driven in from the base at Petawawa that morning for a medical appointment, and her daughter Zola had taken the afternoon off work to meet her for lunch. They hadn't seen each other in 6 weeks. That's the detail that matters. 6 weeks. And this was supposed to be their afternoon. Lieutenant Colonel Adanna Okafor-Briggs had spent 22 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. She didn't talk about it the way some people do, dropping ranks into casual conversation, keeping a photo of herself in uniform above the mantel like a trophy. She was 61 years old, with reading glasses she was always losing, and a laugh that could fill a parking garage. And if you sat beside her at a restaurant, you might think she was a retired librarian, or maybe someone's favorite aunt. She had that quality, the kind of stillness that comes from having actually seen things. She was wearing a dark green winter coat, good boots, and a wool scarf her late mother had knitted sometime in the 90s. She was carrying 2 bags, one with her medical files, one with a birthday gift for Zola. She had just paid for lunch at the Vietnamese place on the main floor and was walking toward the atrium when Security Officer Brendan Fitch stepped directly into her path. He was maybe 30, big through the shoulders in the way that suggested he'd spent a lot of time working on that specifically. He had the kind of face that looked confident without having done anything to earn it yet. "Ma'am." He said it like a period, not a greeting. "Can I ask what's in the bags?" Adanna stopped. She looked at him the way you look at something you can't quite place. "I'm sorry, the bags." He nodded at them. "We've had some reports of shoplifting in this area. I need to check what you're carrying." She had shopped at exactly one store that afternoon, a Hallmark where she'd bought a card. The bags she was carrying were both her own, the medical file bag she'd had for years, and a paper gift bag from a store in Petawawa, where she'd bought Zola's birthday present 3 days ago. "I haven't been in any stores," she said. "These are my own bags. I came in for lunch, I understand that." Fitch's tone was the kind of patient that isn't actually patient. "But I need to verify, mall policy." Behind her, Zola appeared. She was 28, worked in communications, and had inherited her mother's ability to read a room very quickly. "Mom?" She looked from her mother to the security guard. "What's happening?" "It's a misunderstanding," Adanna said, and the way she said it, measured, deliberate, not quite reassuring, told Zola that her mother didn't entirely believe that. "I just need to check the bags," Fitch said again. "You don't have the authority to search my personal property," Adanna said. "I haven't been in any store in this mall. I've been in the food court." "Ma'am, if you won't cooperate, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." "Come with you where?" "To the security office, where we can sort this out properly." And this, right here, was the moment. The whole thing pivoting on what happens next. Because Adanna Okafor-Briggs had spent 22 years learning exactly what that phrase means when someone says it without grounds. "Come with me to sort this out." It means, comply now, and we'll decide later whether you did anything wrong. She stood very still. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I've broken no law, and I haven't been in any shop. If you believe I have, call the Ottawa police. I'll wait." Fitch's face did something complicated. He hadn't expected that. People usually didn't say that. People usually got uncomfortable and went along. He got on his radio. Now there were 3 other shoppers who had stopped. Not because they wanted to get involved. Nobody wants to get involved. But because the scene had that particular energy that makes stopping feel involuntary. A woman with a stroller, 2 teenagers eating something out of paper cups, a man in a senator's hat who looked like he was trying to decide which way his conscience was pointing. Fitch spoke into his radio, requested police attendance. Then he turned back to Adanna with the expression of someone who had just raised the stakes and was committed to it now. "I'm going to need you to stay right here." "I was planning to," she said. Zola stepped up beside her mother. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, and later she would say that was the moment she felt it. The particular cold of being seen as a problem, before you've done a single thing. Her mother had always been the one who explained that feeling to her, patiently, year after year. Now they were standing in it together, under fluorescent lights, in a mall where they'd come to have lunch. The two Ottawa police constables arrived in 9 minutes. Constable Renee Labossière came in first, Constable Tyler Greenwald behind her. Labossière assessed the scene in about 4 seconds, and her face gave very little away, which is either a good sign or a bad one, depending on what she does next. "What's the situation?" she asked Fitch. "This individual refused to cooperate with a routine bag check. We have reports of shoplifting from this section of the mall, and I requested she allow me to verify her bags. She refused and became verbally confrontational." Adanna said nothing. She was watching Labossière. "Ma'am," Labossière said to her, "can you tell me what happened from your perspective?" "I came to the mall for lunch. I was in the food court. I haven't been in any retail store today. When I was stopped, I was walking to the atrium to meet my daughter, who is standing here. The bags I'm carrying are my own. One has my medical files from an appointment this morning, and one has a birthday gift I purchased in Petawawa 3 days ago. The security officer has no grounds to search my personal property, and I told him so." Labossière nodded once. Then she looked at Fitch. "What store reported the shoplifting?" Fitch hesitated. "It was a general report from our monitoring team." "From which store?" Another hesitation. "Shorter this time, but there. I'd have to check with the team." "Did you witness this woman exit any store?" "No, but did you witness her enter any store?" "I was responding to a report." Labossière looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then she looked back at Adanna. "Ma'am, I don't believe you're required to go anywhere or submit to a search. You haven't been detained by police, and you haven't been observed committing an offence." Fitch took a step forward. "I have the authority to. Private security in Ontario and federally regulated spaces does not have the authority to detain someone absent reasonable grounds, to believe an indictable offence has been committed, and they cannot effect a citizen's arrest without directly witnessing the offence." Labossière said this the way someone says something they've said before, not unkindly, just clearly. "You asked for police attendance, and that's what I'm here to address." Fitch's jaw tightened. He looked at Greenwald, who was examining his notebook with great attention. "I want her name," Fitch said. "You can ask her for it," Labossière said. "She's not obligated to provide it." There was a pause. The man in the senator's hat had not moved. The two teenagers had stopped eating. The woman with the stroller had actually wheeled it a few inches closer. Fitch looked at Adanna. "What's your name?" And here is where Adanna Okafor-Briggs did something she had not planned to do when she woke up that morning. She reached into her medical file bag and she pulled out the folder, not because she needed to prove anything. She'd already done that simply by telling the truth and standing her ground, but because something in her, 22 years of it, wanted what happened next to be very clear. She opened the folder and removed a single document. Her KAF health card. That was what it said. Labossière looked at it. Her expression didn't change dramatically, but something in her posture shifted. The specific shift of someone confirming something they'd already half understood. Greenwald, to his credit, actually looked uncomfortable. Fitch looked at the card. He looked at Adanna. He looked at the card again. He stopped. "I am," she said. She said it quietly. She didn't need volume. Fitch opened his mouth and closed it. He had the specific look of someone realizing they had been reading a situation with entirely the wrong set of assumptions, and that everyone who had stopped to watch understood exactly what had happened. We had a report," he started. "I was following protocol." "Protocol," Adanna said, "is not the same as judgment." She put the health card back in the folder. She put the folder back in the bag. She looked at Labossière and said, "Thank you, Constable." She nodded to Greenwald. Then she looked at Zola. "Let's go find somewhere to sit," she said. They walked away. Not fast, not with any performance of it. Just two women walking toward the atrium, one in a green winter coat and one in a red parka, the gift bag swinging from the older woman's hand. The man in the senator's hat exhaled. What happened after was the part that mattered, and also the part that takes longer to tell. Labossière filed a report. It was thorough. It noted the lack of specific grounds for the initial stop, the absence of any identified complainant store, and the sequence of events as witnessed by two Ottawa police constables and multiple civilian bystanders. A copy went to Rideau Centre Mall management. A copy went to the security company that employed Brendan Fitch. Mall management responded within 48 hours. They issued a formal written apology to Lieutenant Colonel Okafor-Briggs. They confirmed they would be reviewing their security protocols and retraining staff on what constitutes reasonable grounds for a stop. They used the word unacceptable twice in 4 paragraphs. The security company's response took a little longer. An internal review was conducted. Fitch was suspended pending that review. He was not ultimately fired, a fact that Zola had feelings about that she wrote in a very detailed text message to her closest friend at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. But his suspension was documented. His record now had this in it, and the company issued a public statement acknowledging that their officer had not followed proper procedure and that they took the matter seriously. These are the outcomes that get called appropriate or proportionate in formal processes. They are also the outcomes that leave people staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, turning something over and over. Adanna Okafor-Briggs didn't give a press statement. She didn't post about it. She spent that afternoon in the atrium with Zola, drinking bad mall coffee, and when Zola started to cry, no, not sobbing, just the kind of leaking that happens when something that's been held gets released. Her mother reached across the table and put her hand over her daughter's. "This is why I kept telling you to know your rights," Adanna said. "Not because knowing them protects you from everything, but because knowing them means you don't disappear into what someone else has decided you are." Zola looked at her. "Were you scared?" Adanna thought about it. "No," she said. "I was tired. There's a difference." Zola opened her birthday present right there in the atrium. It was a book. A History of Women in the Canadian Military, hardcover, a name written in the front, in her grandmother's handwriting from when the book was first published. Passed down through 20 years to land in her hands that afternoon. In a mall food court in Ottawa, in November, under lights that made everything look a little flatter than it was. She held it for a long time without saying anything. The thing about this story that stays with you, if you're paying attention to the right part of it, is not the twist, or what you might think of as the twist. A lot of people, when they hear this, focus on the health card, on the word Lieutenant Colonel, on the particular expression on Brendan Fitch's face when he understood what he was looking at. And that moment is satisfying in the way that moments of reversal are always satisfying. Someone thought they had all the power. They found out they didn't. The story resolves. But Constable Labossiere had already said it before the health card came out. She'd already said, "You don't have reasonable grounds." She hasn't been observed committing anything. She's not required to go anywhere. The card didn't change the facts. The facts were the facts from the beginning. The card only made certain that the facts couldn't be ignored. That's the thing that Zola's text message at 11 o'clock on a Thursday was about. The question that sat underneath the whole afternoon, underneath the apology letters, and the suspension, and the formal review. What happens when there's no card? What happens when someone is standing in a food court with 2 bags they bought themselves and no credential that forces a second look? Lieutenant Colonel Adanna Okafor-Briggs had 22 years behind her. She had the specific posture of someone who has stood in much more difficult rooms than that atrium and not moved. She had the knowledge, precise and practiced, of exactly what any person in that situation is and is not required to do. She had a card. Most people don't. And the part of this story that the apology letters don't address, that the retraining programs gesture toward but can't fully reach, is that the first half second, the glance, the decision, the question about the bags, that happened before any of the rest of it. Before credentials, before constables, before anything Adanna said or did or showed. That half second is the part that needs to change, and it's the hardest part to put in a formal review. Zola framed a photo from that afternoon. Not of the incident. There was no photo of that, and she wouldn't have wanted one. It was a photo her mother took of her in the atrium after, holding the book, her eyes still a little bright from crying. It's hanging in her apartment now, in the hallway between the kitchen and the front door. Every time she leaves the house, she sees it. Her mother calls every Sunday, usually around 7, usually from the kitchen in Petawawa, where she's making tea. They talk about ordinary things mostly, the weather, what Zola is reading, whether Adanna's garden survived the first frost. The particular irrelevance of all that is the point. The ordinary things are the point. Once, a few months after November, Zola asked her mother if she ever thought about it still. "Of course," Adanna said. "Does it make you angry?" There was a pause, the sound of a kettle. "It makes me determined," Adanna said finally, which is anger that's found something to do. If this story made you feel something, if it made you furious or sad, or if it made you think of someone you know or someone you are, leave that in the comments, because these conversations matter. The ones we have out loud, in public, in spaces like this one, where someone else might read what you wrote and feel a little less alone in what they're carrying. And if you believe that fairness shouldn't be afternoon in a mall, that accountability should start at the first contact and not require a credential to trigger it, then subscribe to Sounds of Justice. Because there are more stories. There are always more stories. The only question is whether we're willing to keep paying attention to them.